Hey everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be looking at part 2 of the video we made with Grace Dastous about the unmarked chaser. Obviously, you guys were super receptive to part 1. I think it's awesome content. I'm really glad we were able to have Grace on to do it. And really, she put so much time into it, making these PowerPoints, and as well as doing the recordings with me. I even accidentally deleted our first take of this part 2, so she was even willing to come on a second time and record a second time, so I really do appreciate it. The PowerPoint is going to be in the description below and on our Facebook channel, so you can check that out, use as a resource with your young players if you're a coach, or even a resource for yourself if you are a player. And we hope to do more content like this in the future as well. Please like and subscribe so that when we do, you don't miss out on it. Thanks to Grace. Thanks to Lindsay and Jules and Isabella, who all helped as well with this content. And I hope you enjoy. Let's get into it.
Hi everybody, welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about ball handling, as well as what marked chasers should not do. So it should be a really interesting conversation and kind of a part 2 to match our part 1. So the first thing that we want to talk about, feel free to pause the screen and read this great quote from Julia. But we want to talk about ball handling. And if you're not using your unmarked chaser for ball handling at some point in your offense, you're really missing out on a huge opportunity. And in this quote from Julia, she kind of talks about it, but the reason that we don't see more unmarked chasers having the ball in their hands is because this comes a lot with ball, having the ball in your hands gives a lot of people anxiety. And this comes from this ball, we call it ball anxiety. But it happens frequently with unmarked chasers, I think, because usually as an unmarked chaser, you're giving 1 or 2 chances to catch and get a goal. But if you mess up 1 or 2 times, then the ball handler might not pass it to you more.
Right.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so because I agree. I mean, I think playing through your unmarked chaser with the ball in their hands is kind of one of the best ways to run an offense right now. So if you have those players who are kind of having those confidence issues, which is something I've even experienced in my coaching career, what do you think the best ways are to kind of attack that?
Yeah, so as a coach and as a player, the best thing that you can do is making sure that we give the unmarked chaser as much as an opportunity as we can to have the ball in their hands. Mm-hmm. Practice with them in front of the hoops. If there's a beater in front of them, making sure that I've also done a play where it's 2 chasers and 1 beater, and so they have to either drive and dish or they take their space and shoot. But honestly, the best thing that worked for me was the encouragement I got from my teammates, and really if they take a shot or if they make a move, the first thing that you need to say is "good job," or "I'll take that shot," or "I liked how you take your space." It may seem like a silly thing, but with ball anxiety, the best thing that you can do is compliment, even if it's okay to compliment even more or say it's okay, and then get into specifics about what they should do better. Maybe keep an eye on the keeper or do a pump fake before you take a shot. But it's really impossible. It's really I think the best thing was when Teddy always says, "I'll take that," or Max take your space. That to me is really comforting and kind of eases that ball anxiety a little bit.
Yeah, and I think it's so important because Quidditch really isn't a perfect sport in terms of executing offenses, right? I think it's something I've talked about a lot on this channel where it's I'm more interested with the execution of the play than the final result. So there are plenty of good shots that get missed. There are plenty of good drive and dishes that don't work out for X, Y, or Z reason because we have beaters running around like crazy in the middle of our fields. And for your average, primary ball carrier, they miss so many of those shots in their lives that they probably don't even think of it anymore. But if you have someone who's trying to get more comfortable with the ball in their hand, they might think that every time they're kind of failing with the ball in their hand, that it's kind of a critique of them, and that's why I think it's so important to kind of inspire that confidence.
Yeah, I think if you like talk to anybody who's a good shooter, like you know they've messed up at least 50 times before they found the perfect way to shoot or the perfect time to shoot.
Right.
Same with an offense. Like, I feel like I have to run through an offense or make a mistake 10 times before I feel confident in it. So you kind of have to make a conscious effort to making sure that the unmarked chaser knows it's okay, because they're going to learn from that mistake.
So let's talk about some of the things that an unmarked chaser can do to kind of maximize their value.
So this first slide is the give and go. So in this, the unmarked chaser can either be a passer or a receiver of a give and go. So this is great because when you do a give and go, a give and go is when the ball handler passes it to someone on the wing, and then they drive to the hoops for a shot or a dunk. And in this situation, it's really great because when you pass the ball, either to an unmarked chaser or a marked chaser, all the defense will respond because they're in a threatening position. And when they respond, the drive or the cut is really open for another pass.
Yeah, I think we talk a lot about playing through the unmarked chaser, and maybe we don't talk kind of too clearly about exactly why. And it's what you were touching on, where the unmarked chaser, if a team's playing man-to-man against you, obviously it's a little different if they're playing zone, though there's still unmarked chasers in that case. The unmarked chaser is kind of the issue in the numbers there, because nobody can cover them. So the whole defense either has to respond to that unmarked chaser having the ball in their hand in some way, shape, or form, or just kind of let that player keep going. And you can use those necessitated responses in order to create offense. And this is kind of the first one. All right, so now we're going to look at a couple of these. So let's bring up the first one. And I believe this is one of Lindsay Morella.
Mm-hmm.
So Lindsay has the ball here on the left wing. And this is what you're talking about, right? When she makes that pass, you can basically see the entire defense collapsing onto it.
Right, and especially that beater. Like, that beater is really committing to, I think, is it Taylor Crawford down there?
In the middle of the field is Kylie. Sorry. Yeah. You said Taylor.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. That's Taylor for sure. And then Lindsay basically doesn't waste any time. She's not like watching. I think a lot of people get caught ball watching after they throw a pass, so they don't immediately enter the play. You can see she's already running at this point.
Yeah, and I think it's like some people stop running because they think a driver's just going to drive it in and dunk it. But, this creates such, like, look at how open she is. And even though the beater is responding and turning around, like, she has so much time to shoot it.
Right. And that's part of that. So many teams are just kind of assuming that a driver every time is going to try to drive through their entire team. It's become such a part of Quidditch that they all crash down there, and it just made it so easy for her to score.
Right.
So let's pull up another one.
This one, the unmarked chaser receives the pass and then passes it to the goer. This is Jules.
Yep. So same thing. You can see the overcommitment of the defense, two people going out there. And Jules recognizes this right away. And I think it's an important thing. Jules might be out of your frame slightly, but she's on the left. But I think an important thing is that she's kind of using her eyes to track the defense, even as she has to pick up that pass, because Tyler kind of threw it on the ground to her. Mm-hmm. And that makes her not kind of blind to what's about to happen. Right.
I also think it's like, this is a great thing to do because if you have a very tall keeper or a tall wing chaser, they can catch this pass by the hoops much easier.
For sure.
And maybe a shorter person.
Go to the next one. So this one is going to be Lindsay and Molly working together, I believe, to get these chasers out of position.
Right.
And you can see how overcommitted, I think that's Erin McBride, ends up on this play. She ends up all the way behind Molly, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And that's exactly what they capitalize on. We'll look at the last one.
This one's great because even the camera doesn't even see her cutting.
It's basically the same play.
Yeah.
Yeah. Alrighty. So what other things can you do with the ball in your hands?
So another thing, and we've seen other mark chasers do this a lot, but it's kind of stressful as an unmarked chaser when you may have like a huge keeper rushing you, but you should try to find opportunities where you can drive, and if you need to, dish. So fast breaks are a really great opportunity to drive. You just need to make sure you understand where the beaters are, and also making sure that you have a passing option. I run into this a lot where if I'm starting to drive, a lot of my mark chasers won't drive with me. They'll kind of stay stagnant, which doesn't really benefit anyone except for the one person who might be a safety, right? So if you see an unmarked chaser driving, you should also drive, which I think are a couple good examples. I think Justin Cole is a good example of this too. He is driving when Athena is driving, so that she has a passing option if people overcommit to her.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I think we've kind of gotten to a point strategically where so many people are used to kind of that flat pass back and forth at the top offense that's kind of so in our game that people aren't moving off ball, and you should always be moving off ball, whether you're covered or not, because if you're covered and you're standing around, nobody can ever get a pass to you anyway, so it doesn't make sense to be so stationary. And like you said, Justin's very, very good at that specific thing.
Right. So, yeah, this is a great example of Athena driving, taking all the attention, and then Justin's in such a great spot to help her out.
So I believe Athena's over here on the wing.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's this patience, right? Because this chaser doesn't really step hard out to her. He's kind of waiting for her to come. So she's going to take every single step that he's allowing her to take, rather than, I think some people who maybe are a little less confident might try to throw the pass way out here.
Right.
She even waits to take the contact, which is really the ideal thing, as long as you can keep your arm free, which she does a good job of here. And Justin's just so open that even though she bounced the pass to him, he had all the time in the world to finish it.
Yeah, ideally you would want to take a tackle and a beat too, so the beater can't even get there in time.
Right. Obviously, the tackle, there's a lot to consider. You don't want to put yourself at risk for injury. You also don't want to get hit in a way that you can no longer throw the ball. But if you're confident that you're going to be able to keep that arm free, it's definitely the ideal.
And then in this next one, Lindsay's driving, and no one really steps to her. And if that's the case, then you should feel confident enough to shoot it or to drive it in.
So I think it's going to come off a turnover. Yep. So this happens in slow motion, which is nice. But like you said, I think a lot of people panic, shoot again. And honestly, I mean, there's a good chance she's hitting the shot either way. But she takes that extra step, gets a little bit closer, and makes it a sure thing.
Right.
And I think one thing to note in these driving dishes is something I say a lot when I'm breaking down videos, which is like, it's never harming anybody to kind of take those 5-6 steps in, and then if you don't like what you're seeing, take those 5-6 steps back out, right? That's still way better than just standing around outside, because standing around outside, you're not forcing the defense to do anything, and at least by taking those steps, you are forcing the defense to do something.
And I think another good point that you made, Ethan, was you in all of these plays, you want to make sure that your shooting arm is free.
Mm-hmm.
So either using your left arm to push off, or driving to the side that you're comfortable on, so that you can kind of protect either the pass or the shot.
Yeah, yep. Like you said, turning your body, which you do so well. I think that we have that video coming up a little bit later. But yeah. So talking about shooting, so let's go through that.
Yeah, this is like the I think we said before, like the Jules slide. I think she's so good in this. But so excuse me, there are like 3 hoops. So I was talking to Jules, and she was saying about how if it's 3 hoops and you're doing one-on-one with a keeper, you need to make sure that you position yourself in a way so that your shot, you can shoot at any of the 3 hoops. And you kind of have to play a mind game with the keeper. Either you might want to fake one way, but this is something that is only going to get better when you practice it. So practice positioning yourself in a place where you could possibly shoot from 3 hoops, or move your body into a dangerous spot so you can, and then and practice shooting at the left hoop, middle hoop, and right hoop as much as you can.
Yeah, for sure. I really do think there's kind of 2 ways to attack shooting. I would say that shooting was the only above average part of my Quidditch game, so it's the one thing I feel somewhat confident talking about. Is basically you either need to go into a shooting situation knowing which hoop you want to shoot into, and then doing everything you can to make the defense think that's not the hoop you want to shoot into, or you need to be going in, watching the defense adjust, and then picking your shot based on what's best open. I think Jules is very good at that. And both strategies can work if you're confident in them. The worst thing you can do is to kind of be wishy-washy on what hoop you want to shoot into until it's too late, and then you start to end up with worse shots, or shooting right into keepers, or rushing a shot, all of those kind of things. And like you said, it is so much practice. I think any shooter has shot so many times in their career.
Right.
Yeah. You mentioned... Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. I also was thinking about how I totally agree. It's better to commit to the shot than to be wishy-washy, and they have more of an opportunity to read it.
Right.
I also think that if you're behind the hoops and you're shooting, I think the best thing to do is to shoot at the tall hoop, because worst case scenario, you shoot at the tall hoop and then it gets reset to your offense, who should be in front of the hoops. So that also, for me, has been kind of a comfort if I'm behind the hoops and stressed out about which hoop to shoot at. Usually I'll fake and then go middle hoop, because worst case scenario, I miss it and then Jake's there to pick it up.
Right. And one thing I think Jules does differently in terms of getting the ball behind the hoops than a lot of unmarked chasers, she usually positions herself in a corner rather than flat in the middle. And the only problem with flat in the middle is if a keeper runs directly at you, they're actually, the closer they get, slowly cutting off your shot to all 3 hoops, because basically their body's getting wider in relation to the hoops the closer they get to you. By catching it in the middle and then usually bringing it across the hoops, she is able to kind of have those moments where she can attack each hoop, and the keeper has to take a slightly less direct route at her. I think we'll probably see that in some of these videos. So we have Lindsay out on the right wing here. And I think a good thing she does here, she starts this cut, right, and she realizes that John is basically being forced right into that lane. So rather than bunch up that spot, she takes that little step back to actually make herself a passing option. I think a lot of people just kind of end up running right into that space.
Right.
But
I also
go ahead.
If you're facing a 2-2, she knew that it was a 2-2.
Right.
So she's looking, I think that's part of the reason why she looked at the middle hoop, is because she knew someone was at the left and right hoop. It doesn't seem like the person at the left hoop they're committing to the person who's cutting instead of the middle hoop.
Exactly. And pass shots are always a nice thing. If you see someone cutting and you can kind of take something that could be a pass or a shot, which is kind of what she does here, because you can see her teammate even ends up throwing it through a second time. So I jumped right by it, but this is about to be one of those Jules plays. So you can see when Jules is catching the ball, she's off screen. She's so far outside the hoops, and that makes it so I think this is Yada who's going to crash on her. Can't really take an angle that cuts off everything, and she ends up just throwing it through that middle hoop, like you said.
Right. I think that's something that we've talked about too. Is she catches it, like you said, she catches it out slightly outside and then runs parallel to the hoops, so that the keeper has to step kind of to that odd spot and then has to react to her movement.
We'll look at one more right here. This is old film. You really dug for this.
Jules gave me this one.
So same thing. She's outside the hoops, and this allows her to... You can see she's almost running away from the keeper, but also opening herself up to more options.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, don't get me wrong, she also hits an absurd shot. She's kind of like the Jake of unmarked chasers in that way, where it's like you can't fully exactly do what they're doing, but still the concepts are all there for sure.
Right. So this next part is how you might create space for your team. And this is just different. And I really like this quote from Lindsay about how the unmarked chaser can act as a director. And that's because they have, it's kind of like the keeper on defense. The keeper can kind of see the whole field. And same with like a goalie in soccer. This is kind of similar for the unmarked chaser. Because they don't have a defender right in front of them, they can see the whole field. And they can say, you know, who's open, where the beater is, where they should pass. So it's really important for the unmarked chaser to have the ball in their hands, but it's also really important that you consult with the unmarked chaser to create space and opportunities for your offense.
Yeah, and I think that's partially like a proper recognition of the value of your unmarked chaser, which is basically what we've been talking about this entire time, right? Because really any offense you think of, even things that are as simple as like your drive and dish offense, are largely predicated on the value of the unmarked chaser. So it's still all about what they're doing at any given time, and it makes sense to kind of use them in that director role. So let's talk about some of the plays you can run.
So this is a kind of a classic pick and roll. I'll just go over quickly what a pick and roll is in case anyone doesn't know. But in the little diagram here, the blue circle is the unmarked chaser. So the unmarked chaser would kind of approach the defender. And we'll talk about like what Lindsay has a good example of what kind of angle you kind of want to approach them at in a set offense. But you're going to pick the defender. And because you're unmarked, it's going to be really hard for anyone to step to you. So you kind of have a free lane when the unmarked chaser gives you a pick. And then once you get a pick, you want to roll towards the hoops, making sure that you are keeping an eye on the ball carrier so that you could do like when you roll, they could pass it to you.
Yeah, and the reason the pick and roll is so good for the unmarked chaser is because usually the person who's coming to set a pick is kind of bringing a defender with them, right? And you're just counting on the defense to make a mistake. But in a hypothetical world where a defense plays a pick and roll perfectly, there's a lot of times where it doesn't actually create value. But when you're running it with unmarked chaser, there's no proper decision for that defender to make. They're always going to kind of be behind both the ball carrier and the person setting the pick, which kind of creates a lot of problems. And it's why it's so deadly in snitch on pitch, which I think you're going to show in some of these examples, because at any point in snitch on pitch, if you can get somebody open driving to the hoops, it's going to be a goal because there's no beaters there. And that makes it such a good play overall. So we'll look at a couple of these.
You compared it one time to basketball.
Right.
Like, imagine you are playing basketball and you have you're down a person, right? You're always the pick and roll is such a great thing to use all the time.
Yeah, exactly. It'd be like you said, if someone had a card in a basketball game, it'd be like, oh, this pick and roll is going to get us a basket literally 10 times out of 10. And that's what we're going to see on a lot of these plays. So this is from Snitch on Pitch, Boston versus Austin. I think one thing really worth noting here is you can see you're almost kind of doing a shove move to, I think this is Davis Rowe. And obviously that's not a legal basketball pick, but it is a legal Quidditch pick. The only thing you're not allowed to do is charge through him. So if you decide to get ahead of steam and just run through Davis here, that would be a card. You also technically can't grab onto him, though I've seen plenty of that happen in Quidditch without getting called on these picks. Yeah, go ahead.
I'd be screwed if I went to play basketball again.
Because what he was trying to do is what we call going under a screen, which basically means running around you on the bottom side so that he can then get back to Jake. And even though you were set up kind of behind him in the right way, I don't know if people noticed, but your back foot was almost kind of behind his body. There's a chance he was going to get around you until you kind of put this shove into it. And then you're going to see from there how much space Jake gets. And that one you didn't roll, but you were also kind of inherently behind the play anyway once you put that shove in, so it kind of makes sense.
Teddy also took my lane.
You sound slightly bitter about it.
Nah. I think it's also really important to note that this was one thing that I had to really communicate to Jake on, because I really like to set screens that are kind of take the person out of the play, take the defender out of the play, whereas Jake has specifically told me he kind of likes picks that are slightly shove someone off and then roll. So these kind of two examples are kind of lighter picks, whereas the Lindsay one is kind of more of a solid pick.
Yeah. Also, kind of shout out to what Casey Irwin's doing here defensively. Like, she sees your screen coming, and she starts fading immediately, and actually makes it very, very hard for you to get this screen on.
Right.
Because she does eventually kind of get around it to a degree, but you can see that the whole defense is already kind of stepping in anyway. You roll perfectly here because Teddy didn't take your lane. And you can see that he's going to hit this shot, but if he wanted to, he could have just flipped it over to you, and you would have had a very easy goal. And the last one we're going to look at, like you were talking about, is this Lindsay one.
If you can pause it right when she does the pick.
I will. Because it's just so textbook.
Yeah. So, yeah, if you look at where she is now, she kind of came, it was almost like she was coming up from behind him. So he had absolutely no idea, unless the defense tells him, that there's a pick happening.
Right.
And this is kind of more of a solid pick because it takes the defender totally out of the play and John can just drive it in. So I like to, and I kind of show this in the diagram, but come at them from an angle from behind them so they have no idea it's happening, which makes it more effective and kind of harder for them to kind of make the adjustments that Casey did in the last video.
Exactly, yeah. Both of the other two picks where the person was trying to go under your screen, that's impossible when you position like Lindsay does here. The one thing a ball carrier has to be on the lookout is that when you set this kind of screen, the defender can technically sometimes just come over the screen, so just go immediately at the ball carrier. So it's the ball carrier's job to take a route that at least forces that person into the screen to some degree.
Yeah, like you might want to, I think Teddy said, like rub shoulders with the person who's doing the pick. Obviously, you don't want to be too close that the defender gets a wrap on you, but you don't want them to come in that space.
Yeah, John almost starts his run flatly here. Like, it's not even diagonal at all. The first step is almost like 90 degrees left, and that allows the defender to be too far from him long enough for Lindsay to get her body on him.
He also is holding the ball in a spot where the defender couldn't have gotten it. And that's, I think, really important, too.
For sure. All right, and then we're going to get into one of my favorite slides here, taking your space.
So this also very much has to do with ball anxiety and just comfortable having the ball in your hands. So when you move with the ball, the defense has to react to it. And either the keeper or another chaser comes to defend you, or the beaters react to you. Any movement of the defense is going to create space. So let's first talk about the Casey one.
Okay. Is it the one in the middle here, right?
Yes.
All right. So Casey's right here, coming down the right wing.
Mm-hmm. So look at, I think it's Yada stepping out on Casey. Like the keeper is completely out of the hoops, like not even near the hoops. And Casey, and when this happens, Casey does a really good job of, usually when people say take their space, they mean forward, but sometimes it is beneficial to take your, and she's really good at this, but taking your space back, because then that'll draw the keeper out of his zone for a longer period of time.
Yeah, Casey's first step when she gets a ball is often actually away from the hoops unless she has an immediate scoring opportunity, and it just gives her a chance to kind of analyze what's going on. In this case, like you said, Yada ends up literally almost off the field. Whereas, like, really, like, he wasn't accomplishing much there. Like, even if he tackles her, I'm not even sure that they can get a turnover off of it. And she recognizes that. She swings to Augie. There's now nobody at the hoops. And pretty much the easiest goal he's ever going to get. But through Casey's hard work.
Yeah, and that only happens when the unmarked chaser gets the ball, feels comfortable with the ball, and then starts to move and find an open area. So it's an incredible thing to do, but those things kind of need to lead up to it. So in this video, Rachel is taking her space, and when she does take her space, nobody responds to her. And if that happens, you need to make the defense pay and shoot it or drive it or do something, because if they don't respond to you, then that's your opportunity to score.
Yeah, I'm glad you have Pan Am video, because I probably said take your space 150 times this weekend. I wouldn't be surprised if I had audio on if you could hear it in the background. But yeah, so she gets the ball, and obviously there's nobody anywhere near her, right? And I think a lot of people in her spot here just kind of stand out there, right? And the worst thing to do is stand out there and the defense isn't responding to you, because you're getting no value out of what you're doing. But that's not what she's going to do on this play, obviously. We've mentioned the Unmarked Chaser as a director. You saw her directing, I assume it was the person behind the hoop, who we can't see right now, with a little point there. But then she keeps getting in closer. Again, nobody's responding to her. This beater is basically behind the hoops. I think they both have balls, actually, and neither one's stepping out. No chaser's stepping out.
Yeah, like they're not even doing, like, I think there's a beater right by the small hoop, too.
Yep.
If they're not pump faking, if they're not pretending to beat you, then drive it in, make them pay, and that's exactly what she does.
Yeah, I mean, she started that ball probably 10 yards out on the left side, and she took a shot from 2 yards away from the hoop when all was said and done. And that's just the confidence of taking your space and making the most of it.
Right, like you saw her direct that other person. Other chasers need to be, when the Unmarked Chaser's taking their space, the other chasers need to be in good positions to assist if need be.
So very similar situation, probably from the same game, actually. So again, waiting for someone to step out. And this time, they do step out. You can see the beaters all starting to come. She again got as close as she could have. She maybe could have even gotten another step if she really wanted to, but at least drew everybody up to her. And then Harry gets such an easy goal because of that.
This is a good example of snitch on pitch. I'm not sure if it was actually snitch on pitch, but there's no beaters in the play. Mm-hmm. And she is driving, and she waits as long as she possibly can to take all of the defenders and then dish it off.
Right, so here's Lindsay driving down the wing. Important thing you noted, when your Unmarked Chaser's driving, you should not be flat. You should be making cuts. I see every other Rutgers Chaser here making a cut, and I'm sure the person behind the hoops is making one as well. Yeah, you can see. These are really kind of the ideal cuts, too, all over. But again, she's being patient. I think this is Steph Breen is kind of stepping off of her, so she's taking every step she can get. She waits until the keeper almost initiates contact. I think easily could have there. And then just flips it off, which was just so free and easy. But yeah, taking space is so much about having the confidence, like you said, and then also waiting till the last possible second. The only way you can get used to what that last possible second is by doing it a ton, right? Right. I think the one thing, people are generally better at it with contact, waiting till the last possible second. People are less good about it with beats. You really do have so much flexibility, because I think most refs call beat before pretty loosely. So you can really get that pass off pretty late. And if you get that bludger out of that beater's hand, you did even more for your team than if you just kind of drew some people to you.
Right. So this next section is going to be about what other chasers, what marked chasers should be doing to maximize the Unmarked Chaser's value.
Sure.
So this is we've seen this a couple times, but this is the drive and dish. So this is like a classic. If you're a marked chaser and you're running with the ball, you're gonna get a lot of attention on you, and use that attention to make sure that you can find the unmarked chaser that's most of the time open, and take advantage of that.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest differences in the college and club game for ball carriers is that awareness. A good club ball carrier is never not going to know where their open options are. And because of that, they become that much more effective, because like we said, that's the inequality in the defense. The inequality isn't you driving through 4 people and scoring. It's you drawing some attention and then finding those open passes. Whereas a lot of college ball carriers, I feel like, kind of are still struggling to develop that skill. This will be a great example here. Tyler, who I think we've mentioned before, is a pretty physical driving type guy. Draws all the defense to him, including the beater on the right there and 2 chasers. and at the last second just gets over Allie, who also timed her cut very well, I thought, on that play.
And I think this is part, like, I think, how do I say this? I think some people want to be the one that drives it through 10 people, still gets a goal even when they're tackled, which is great. And like Tyler could do that. Mm-hmm. However, like, why go through 10 people, maybe get beat, maybe get stopped, when you could take all the attention and dish it at the right time?
I mean, it's also better for your team because you're going to use less energy. It's a lot less energy to throw a pass than to drive through 4 tacklers. Right. So you're going to be able to stay on the field longer.
So it's just really important, as I've said a million times, to know where your unmarked chaser is at all times, because they're most likely always open. Yeah, for sure. And we talked about this slide as well, but you want to kind of wait until the last possible second, like we saw Lindsay do in the other video about taking her space. You want to wait until the last moment so that they're either about to wrap you or they're totally committing to you, so that you can dish it off, and so that other person, the unmarked chaser, doesn't get hurt.
Yeah, I think this is a chemistry thing and also kind of working together, because there's 2 parts to this coin, I think. If you wait too long, so the unmarked chaser already made their cut and now is flat next to a hoop, that actually makes them less dangerous. You have to hit them in a smaller area. The keeper has a better chance of having registered them. But if you if the unmarked chaser is kind of reading what you're doing, kind of taking those mini steps we were talking about in the last video, and then hitting their cut at the exact right time, you should be able to hit them at the right moment. I think this is a good one from Taylor because he really waits till the last second. Like you said, make sure that this beat is actually coming at him before he dishes. Because right. If he threw that right away, I think she probably just turns and beats Lindsay.
Right. I think a lot of the times when these turnovers kind of happen, it's because maybe the ball carrier could have held on to the ball a second or 2 longer. You kind of want that beater out of the play so that they can't reach the unmarked chaser at the hoops.
Exactly. And this is, again, kind of waiting very long, waiting for everybody to kind of step out to him. He might be slightly off screen, but Teddy's in the left corner here, drawing out defenders. You're kind of taking those mini steps we were talking about so that you can really hit your cut at the right time. And he throws a perfect pass to you. And same concept here. You see the entire defense collapsing. He knows where Lindsay is the entire time, and she makes her cut well timed.
Yeah, and just to kind of reiterate, like, I think a lot of the times unmarked chasers get blamed for not executing that play correctly, when in reality the ball carrier should be doing a lot leading up to that pass and that dish.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, go ahead.
So this is like also one of your slides, right, Ethan?
I do love a good no-look pass.
So this is a no-look pass, which basically speaks for itself. But when you're driving, you kind of don't want to give the offense any kind of clue about that you're going to pass to the unmarked chaser. And it makes it so much more successful, because when you're driving with the ball in your hand, the keeper, the beaters, all the defense is reading what your face is doing. So if you're completely looking away from the unmarked chaser, they're going to think you don't even see that person, which makes the pass even more open.
Yeah, one thing I've done a decent amount in practice as a coach, super simple drill, right? You have ball carrier and a cutting unmarked, I guess, because everyone's unmarked. And then you're the keeper, and you just tell the ball carrier that they can drive to X point, and then they either have to shoot or pass. When you're the keeper, because I just play as the keeper in this drill, you get a chance to just watch their eyes. And you can literally tell them if their eyes are going to good places, or if they're staring down one hoop from the second they get the ball to the time they shoot, and you just walk over to that hoop and block it super easily. Like, these are things that are so easy to notice if you put yourself in a situation where you can read your own player's eyes.
And it's like muscle memory, I feel like. Like, you have to practice looking and then exact angle that your arm needs to be to dish it off when you're not looking, right? Because you have to practice it over and over again to know how much force to put on the ball or what angle your arm should be at. So yeah, I love that drill. I'm going to steal that for BU.
Yeah, because it's very much a mind's eye thing, right? You basically, it's not that you never looked at a spot. You're basically, your brain can actually recreate what an area looked like, and your muscle memory can use that to throw into it, but you have to develop that.
Right.
I don't think we need to look at all the ones in this page to get the idea, but we can at least look at this one, because Marty does a very nice job of a no look here. Gets in the lane, and you can see, let me see if I can go back to it for a second, right, I don't know if I'll be able to stop at the right moment, right there. So just before I stopped it here, he did get a quick look over there, so he now knows what that entire area looks like. He knows that A, where I think that's Aaron is, and he knows B, that there's nobody near her, so his pass doesn't need to be perfect, which means he can take a little off of it. He doesn't zip this ball to her, right? He kind of loops it over to her.
Yeah.
And that's very free. And you saw the beater through because he was looking at the hoops, and all the Quaffle players kind of crashed to him because of that.
Right. So in this case, a lot of the times and I've experienced this too, when the unmarked chaser gets the ball, either at the wing or behind the hoops, a lot of the times a point defender or a defender will immediately rush and try to tackle or stress out. I mean, it's just good defense, but to put pressure on the unmarked chaser. And if that's the case, like, you need to be aware of that so you can be in a position to help if that happens.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And also, this is knowing your players kind of thing, right? Because every player is different. I mean, if Jules, who has a fantastic arm, gets the ball behind the hoops and someone's charging at her, maybe you don't need to be as close to her because she can just whip it, all the way back to the other side of the field, and you can use a reset if you really need to. If you know that your unmarked chaser maybe doesn't have as strong of an arm, then you need to make sure you're making a cut a little bit better to give them options. You need to be a little bit closer to them. If everybody is 25 yards away from the unmarked chaser, and the unmarked chaser doesn't have a 25-yard pass in their arsenal, then you as a team are not giving that player a chance to succeed.
Right.
I think it's a play of you and Jake where he does throw it back to you, and then does come as kind of a helpful release outlet.
And this is something that we've talked about too. Of I like to have someone there in case I need it. So he's responding to that as I'm moving and taking my space, and he's there immediately when Solly charges me.
Yeah. And we won't talk about what happened at the end of the play. But you can watch our other video on this game if you want to see me get really angry about it.
Yeah. Oh my God, your reaction's so funny.
But yeah, exactly. Giving you that outlet, because if he's still 25 yards away from you and you do have a good arm, if you don't get a chance to throw that pass before Solly wraps you, once you're wrapped, no matter who you are, you don't have a good arm anymore because you can't step into your pass. So you need a passing option that is pretty close to you on the field.
Right.
All right, so let's talk about what marked chasers should not do to kind of not help an unmarked chaser.
Oh, this is one of my favorite topics. So the first thing is this kind of Hail Mary pass. And we kind of see this in football. Like, you might as well just try it, like, to get a touchdown. But when the unmarked chaser is behind the hoops and the defenders are still in their position, the beaters still are in their position, and it's a full force defense, it's really difficult to just get the ball behind the hoops with it's just like basically if you rotated the offense to behind the hoops. It's a really hard play when it's just an unmarked chaser versus a full-fledged defense. So you need to do something or move the offense a little bit or move to assist the unmarked chaser behind the hoops. You can't just throw it behind the hoops and expect them to be able to make a play that most chasers are unable to do against a full-fledged defense.
Yeah, I think that's something I critique a lot in match analysis. Even when it's not like a true Hail Mary, when it's just kind of like someone runs this as their offense, they just try to throw the ball all the way from like almost half field to a player behind the hoops. And I always say, like, move it to the wing, then move it to the player behind the hoops is going to get you much better results. One of the things about this that I think people don't consider is as you can see from kind of this joking little picture you posted, there's a lot of arc to a pass that's going to be that long, just by default. Nobody can zip a ball 40 yards, because it's one of the best people in the world arm strength wise, and they're still going to throw that arc to it. If you throw that arc and your unmarked chaser has to kind of be tracking that arc, they have to turn their eyes to the sky. And the way we talked about Jules earlier in this video, how on that low one, she could keep her head up as she was recovering the ball to kind of study where the defenders were doing. You can't do that if you have to track a ball in the sky. You have to look up, and for all you know, you're about to take a really hard hit, you're about to take a really hard beat, and all these things can kind of hurt people's confidence of even going to those balls in the future.
Right. And I think that's just such a great point, Ethan. Like, if I'm catching a pass right in front of my face, I'm already scanning where the defense is. I'm scanning where the beaters are. But if I have to completely turn my face upwards and up, I don't have an opportunity to look at where the beaters or where the defenders are. And it gives the defense so much time to respond to that pass. Like, if you're arcing it so high up, the keeper's already going to be there when you get that pass.
Yeah. And like a Max Havlin is going to beat you 5 seconds before the pass ever gets to you.
Exactly. Yep. And this is another thing. Don't bring your defender to the unmarked chaser's open spot. So in this picture right here, I'm completely open. The keeper is committing to the ball carrier. If in this case where your unmarked chaser is completely open, if you go to that spot as well, your defender can cover both of you, which doesn't help anyone. If you do, say you did that because you wanted to do an off-ball pick, which is great. Off-ball picks are great. When you do an off-ball pick is when two chasers could be marked, could be unmarked, pick for one another so that one of them can get open. In an off-ball pick with an unmarked chaser, the unmarked chaser kind of changes people, which is great if you wanted to be the unmarked chaser for a bit. So, sorry, kind of a tangent. If you are trying to do that, don't do it at a time when the unmarked chaser is completely open, because then the defender could just cover both of you.
Yeah, for sure. I'm a big fan of off-ball picks. It's something that our Tufts offenses used to run back in the day, because a lot of the times what actually happens, rather than you just switching who the unmarked chaser is, everybody ends up unmarked when everybody makes the cuts off that pick and roll. Because I think a lot of defenders study how to react to an on-ball pick and roll, and less people are ready for an off-ball pick and roll. And I think it is kind of other things we were talking about before too, right? It is knowing how the other player plays, and it is working together. There was that one where Teddy took your lane, so you didn't go into that lane because it just didn't make sense at that point. There was that one where John was being forced across the zone, so Lindsay didn't go into that lane. She was able to get a pass instead. It's all about spacing out properly as a team.
Right. And this is kind of also what we've talked about with ball anxiety. When an unmarked chaser gets the ball and you immediately ask for it back over and over again, then that leads to a situation where there's just more ball anxiety. And so in this slide, if you're interested in reading more from Quidditch Australia, there was an author who wrote an article about ball anxiety. So I linked it here. And this is also what we've talked about before, but the best thing that a coach can do for unmarked players, unmarked chasers, is practice with unmarked chasers with the ball in their hands.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's definitely worth mentioning, this is just strategic too, along with helping with ball anxiety. If you just throw a ball to somebody and move it back, like we were talking in the take your space slides, it doesn't actually do anything. The defense doesn't even have a chance to react. So really, you're just throwing a ball for no reason. It's kind of similar to something I criticize a lot in my match analysis, which is a tap beat on a point defender with no reason, where the team doesn't react to it. So it's like, what was really the point of doing that? You just created risk for no reason. Same with a pass to an unmarked chaser where you just ask for the ball right back. You created risk for absolutely no reason. You didn't do anything to defense. And a good team is actually going to use that pass to create offense out of it. So of all the options you could do by making that pass, the asking for it right back is the one that makes the absolute least sense.
Right.
So that's going to do it for us. Do you want to shout out the people who helped you out with this one?
Yeah. So Lindsay, thank you so much. She gave me so much film, so much video. Isabella edited all of these slides, and Julia gave so many pointers, gave so much video. And overall was just a really great help. This PowerPoint is going to be shared and viewable to anyone to use as a coaching tool.
Yep.
Obviously, you can you should link the midline videos, but in case you wanted to use this to start off your year or to work with a session with your unmarked chasers, I would also recommend that marked chasers get to see this video too, because overall there's just some good strategies for everybody.
For sure, and you can watch through all the videos that we might have skipped as we went through the two parts. This PowerPoint will be in the description below, and it'll probably also be up on the Midline's Facebook pages and other social media accounts. Grace, thank you so much for coming on and doing these two videos. I think they are very valuable. And like you said, they aren't just valuable for unmarked chasers. They're valuable for everyone because, as I think we've both said a bunch of times by now, offenses in 2020 in Quidditch should be working through their unmarked chasers, or at least utilizing them for maximum value. And I think this is a great tool to help teams do that. All right, so that's going to do it for us today. Thanks everybody so much for watching. Please like and subscribe for more videos like this. And you take care.